Yes, hi guys. In this video, I'm going to show you some use cases of the follow path. Follow path is one of the really exciting tools that includes a lot in it in a single tool. So it could be used for objects, wrapping or copying objects, or it could be used for profiles. So let me just show us a few use cases. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to use Image 3D to import an image. I have a basic image over here, which is just a flower. And I'm creating basically this flower over here. So we have this flower, and notice this has a lot of details. We can later simplify it, but actually if you want to wrap on something, you need to have the details that it should be able to wrap on something. So I actually did the higher resolution. If you make a very a line with a lot of details, you may sometimes have even more details. But yeah, 45,000 should be well enough. Now I'm going to do something very basic, just a simple, nothing special, just kind of a simple spline, something like that. Okay, now suppose I want this object to wrap in a shape like this, so I can select these and I can go to the follow path option and I can choose the wrap option. Okay, now once I have the wrap option, you see this actually wrapped the opposite way. Sometimes you have to rotate that, so it's wrapped but it's opposite way, so that's okay. I'll have to rotate this object. So let's rotate the object, or I can rotate the initial object, or now after it's done I can rotate, it doesn't really matter. So we can see it, what's going on. Okay, so you can see what this actually did. It wrapped this object around this shape. So it's kind of like it's used as a transformation. So if I rotate the spline, you'll see it actually followed the spline. So let me rotate the spline as well. You'll see it basically followed the spline. As you can see now, this follows the same shape as the spline. So basically what this is, it kind of follows a path, it wraps around something, and it's kind of like you have all of these deforms, different styles, and this is like a wildcard, something you can do deform as you choose. Now wrapping objects needs to have some details, as I said. So if I'm going to take now just an example to show, if I'm going to take, let's get rid of this of objects, to get rid of this object as well, and I'm going to take a basic cube, a basic shape. Okay, and let's actually make it smaller, or let's try it first with this size. When I'm going to take this and wrap it around this is not going to work, because you see it has only 6 faces. So if I wrap it around, it becomes straight. Same idea, you can't bend an object that doesn't have details, same idea. But if I would go now and add details to this object, so if I go to resolution, and I'm going to add some details to it. So let's say we have now 24,000 faces. Now it should be able to, where is it, to follow path. Now it should be able to wrap around nicely this object. But this is not the best way to wrap an object, okay? Objects is not meant to do it, because you have to be careful, you have to know the math of how it's going to bend. So if you look over here, in actually, you have here, things are self-intersecting, because this is bending around, and while it bended, over here it actually created a problem. You'll have to use Magic Fix to fix it, because over here you have Magic Fix, or is in Tools, Magic Fix, to clean up, because this is actually broken here. So it's not the best idea to do something like this. So if you want to do something like this is where you actually use a profile. But before going to profiles, I want to show one more example of where objects are, where it's good to use objects for it. So I'll take the same example, a cube, but now we're going to make it a very basic a very small cube. I'm going to make, let's say, just size would be just 5, and then would be 5, and height, let's say, the depth 5. Actually height, let's make it more, just so it's better visible. Okay, and I'll do something like this, and now I select this and I go follow path. In this case I use the duplicate option, and if I do duplicate option, look what's happening. This is basically positioning. So if anything you want to position, I use the basic cube, but you can use any object, of any custom object that you need, and you can choose the amount of things you want to do, which is quite interesting. And it's the same thing if you do it to overdo it. In this case 250 will create overlapping, like one object goes into the other object, and this will overlap with each other. In some cases, if you want to create interesting patterns, like for jewelry, you do want to create these overlapping pieces, and then use obviously Magic Fix to clean it up. But in general, you got to be careful. That's not what you want to do. There is an option even on wrap. There's also an option. See, this has no details, but there is an option to repeat that. And if you're going to repeat that, it will actually create copies. So it's similar to copies, but it's different, because duplicate gives you an option, the amount of copies you want. This doesn't give you the amount of copies it wants. It just knows that it needs to finish this, and it needs to make it solid, complete, finished. So this is kind of saying repeat, but with just the exact amount that will be finished. So if you have no details, it will just repeat itself if it can't stretch it. Actually, even if it can stretch it, repeat means the size. If the size is very small, I made it only 5, and this is much longer, it will just make 5, 5, 5, 5. It will keep on repeating itself. And actually, if you see, it started from here, 5, 5, 5, 5, because this is all the same size. And you see the last one was over here, which I think is a slightly smaller. If you see, if I can measure it, you'll see that, okay, it wants me first to confirm it, so I'm not going to do it now. But if you measure it using the measurement tool, you'll see this is a little bit shorter than the others. Nevertheless, that's basically the idea, and you can choose different types. So if you want to wrap it like this copies, it makes it, you see the length, and you can see actually here's the shortest one. Yeah, I can see it clearly. So it made the length is 100, 100, 100, and then this, and it left out some details because it wasn't that. If you, yeah, and you can see all of the details here, which is the same problem here with self-intersects. So it's not a good idea to do it in these cases. You also have an option use tangent, which sometimes makes a big difference of how it follows a path. Sometimes if you need to use tangent, sometimes not, depending on the object. But the tangent basically means the tangent from the line you are following has a direction, a tangent, and if you want to use it or not. There's also an option to taper, which you can make interesting styles. For example, something like this. And this is even more interesting when you wrap something like the image I've shown before, import. You can make the image kind of skew, and a lot of interesting things that you can do. Just kind of give it a perspective, let's say a wall, and give it a perspective of depth, which I guess would be the other way around. The further away it goes, the shorter it gets. So you can see you get, you can actually go reverse, which, yeah, instead of just changing the taper, you can just play with the reverse. And you can also play with the start and finish. So you have this, let's say, thing you want to follow, but you don't want to follow it from the beginning. You want to have a start and finish and so on. So that's basically the ideas you have while using, you see the taper here on duplicate, but over here you have the number of copies. And as I said, number of copies can self-intersect also, and yeah, and you can play with these. And the same thing, you have a tangent here, which in this case, it still makes a difference, but it's hard to visualize, but sometimes it's very easy to visualize the difference. Okay, so those are basically the ideas how you wrap objects, and has its benefits when you want to use that. You also notice that when you do with the object, the path that you want to follow is always a profile, and the thing that is following is always an object. And it doesn't really matter which you select first, because we know that you can't follow a path on an object. So we always know the object is following the path. But that's not the case when you go with another profile. So let me show you the example. So if you go with the profiled ideas, I'm going to draw a simple sketch. So let's say I'm going to take a simple ellipse and make it something like, kind of something like this, let's say. Okay, so I made it a lot of details. I don't need actually these details. Just happen to have done it. So this is the first I select this. That means that I want this ellipse to follow this path. So in this case, let's take a look what will happen. In this case, this follows it. Okay, I have to undo start to finish. Let me just make it this, and let me do no taper, zero taper. Okay. So if you see what this happens, actually what this is doing, it follows this entire object is following, and this will have no intersection because you're only bending a very small 2D thing. You may still have self-intersection if you can have very sharp bends that even this thing will intersect if you bend them. So it's basically just physics. It's depending if you can bend that. It's a very tiny 2D thing, but still has some width and depth. And if you're going to make very sharp edges that it needs to follow, you may still have an issue. But yeah, so would be any tool you use. And this is actually even more where tangent can make a difference. You can see that if you don't follow the tangent, the object basically follows in the same order, and it doesn't really rotate the object when it follows the tangent. So where it makes the problem. So that's basically what it is. You have some other settings here if you want to fill start and finish. So you can leave it open kind of as a pipe. Then you can add thickness to it. So let's say if we do it like this, and you have this kind of pipe, and then you can go to add thickness, and I'm going to add thickness either negative or positive to make it something like this. So you kind of created this type of thing. So it could be used for a lot of things. Where I like using this a lot is on existing objects. So let's say, for example, we have a let's take a basic example. So let's say if I take a simple plane, and let's say I create a plane like this, and now I go and I select some vertices. Let's say I'm going to select this and this and this. Okay, now I'm going to move that out and create something like this. Okay, so now that I have this selected, let's go into the edge mode, and I'm going to select this entire edge, and I'm simply going to copy it. Okay, so now I have this profile which is aligned next to this edge, and now I'm going to create, let's say, I can do it with an object and kind of I want to align objects to it, but with the drawing, let's go 3D sketch. Let's use an example again to take some kind of ellipse here. Same example used before. I made a mistake. I used them both in the same profile. I didn't select them, so I'm going to actually have to select this and split it off. So because it needs to be a separate profile, and I have to have this selected first, and then I select this one, and now I choose to follow path to follow this, and you can see we kind of added a trimming or something like this. So this will add it to the center, so I'll have to then, move it out a little bit. So this will be, if I finalize it, I'll just go and go and move it out to align it, or use any of the align tools, SelfCAD align tools. But this is kind of, we're using an existing object, just copying a profile. You can use it like adding trimmings to windows, copying the edges around the windows, or things like that, where this becomes very handy. But I want to show you where I started talking before, is the idea of depends what follows what. So if I would select first the spline, or this is not a spline, lines, but I freeze these lines, and then the profile that I want to follow, actually the tool will understand that you want this profile to follow this small thing, which obviously you cannot do physically. The tool will still allow you to do it, but the outcome will not be what you expect. So you can see what happens over here, which actually it creates an interesting object. As a designer, you may figure out how to make use of it, but I wouldn't know how to visualize how a spline, like a line like this, would follow a small circle or ellipse. How this will create such an object, it will be hard for me to visualize that. But yeah, it may be a possibility. But in any case, these are basically the use cases for what this is doing. Okay, I would like to see your examples. I would love to see if you can share some. Thank you.